Hello guys, Ashit Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco, and welcome to my channel. For this video I'm actually bringing a video that I wanted to bring you for quite some time, and the reason I didn't do it before was that I didn't have the RX 7900 XT ready to retest in games like, for example, Hogwarts Legacy, Guardians of the Galaxy and so on, some games that I actually had to retest, so I asked AMD once again to resend me the RX 7900 XT. They did, thank you by the way. So I retested these games and I am now bringing the RX 6950 XT versus 7900 XT versus 7900 XTX. And in terms of US prices, the RX 7900 XT is selling for $599 plus the Starfield bundle, of course. The 7900 XT is selling for $749, so basically $150 over the 6950 XT. And the 7900 XTX is selling for a minimum of $939 on Newegg US. As for the European prices, we have the 6950 XT at €629, the 7900 XT at €818, and the 7900 XTX at €949. And I'm making this video exactly because of that. With these prices in mind, which card should you get? If you're looking to upgrade, which one of these three cards should you get? Or if you have a 6950 XT, for example, are these RDNA 3 cards any kind of upgrade? Is the upgrade big? Is the upgrade small? That's exactly why I'm making this video. And well, let's then go to the awesome benchmarks, almost as awesome as today's sponsor. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mode, bringing you all the software deals you need, like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and even Windows Server 2022. For all of these, you can use my SKG discount code for 25% off, getting a Windows 10 serial key for only $16. Then use the key on your Windows settings, and you'll have an activated system. Let's go!
He's going to catch us! Keep running!
We start with Plague Tale Requiem, one of the best games I've ever played. At 1080p the skills are actually well maintained, with the RX 7900 XT being 23% faster than the RX 6950 XT and the XTX being 35% faster. At 1440p the RX 6950 XT drops below the 100 FPS mark, but still pretty close, with the RDNA 3 cards delivering quite higher results. As they should. And it is only at 4K that the differences are indeed more noticeable, with the RX 6950 XT barely hitting 50 average FPS, while the RX 7900 XT pushes 65, being 26% faster, and the RX 7900 XTX pushing 75, being 46% faster. Assassin's Creed Valhalla it is, and at 1080p we have the three cards performing exceptionally well, with the RX 7900 XTX reaching 215 average FPS, with even the RX 6950 XT being able to deliver almost 180. At 1440p the three cards can still deliver high FPS, as this game isn't heavy at all, even more for cards like these. And even at 4K, the RX 6950 XT is still strong enough to break through the 85 average FPS mark, while the other two cards sit comfortably at over 100 FPS. Cyberpunk 2077 is still a fairly demanding game, but mostly if you're playing at ultra settings and higher resolutions. At 1080p, the RX 6950 XT performs exceptionally well, being only around 12% slower than the RX 7900 XT, which is considerably more expensive. As the resolution goes up to 1440p, the RX 6950 XT still holds its ground, pushing 115 average FPS, with the RX 7900 XTX pushing 157, being 36% faster. And at 4K the results finally come down a lot, with the RX 7950 XT going below the 60 average FPS mark, while the RDNA 3 cards are pushing 73 and 81 FPS. Now we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. The results should actually be higher, but sadly the game has been quite broken for some time, especially in the 1% lows with some cards. At 1080p, the RX 6950 XT is still pushing 176 average FPS, which is a very respectable number, even more at extreme settings. But the RDNA 3 cards are on a whole new level, with the RX 7900 XT being 39% faster and the RX 7900 XTX being 49% faster. At 1440p the performance scaling gets maintained, with the RX 7950 XT still achieving a respectable 130 FPS, while, of course, the RX 7900 XTX is pushing above 200. And at 4K, every single one of these cards can push over 80 average FPS, but if you want the most FPS you can get, the RX 7900 XTX is definitely the way to go. And I'm glad to bring Forza Horizon 5, as both the game and drivers got updated and made the RX 7900 series performance raise to levels where they should have been since day one. At 1080p we get once again massive performance uplifts when using Smart Access memory, with the 3 cards pushing extremely high FPS numbers, something that does not change that much at 1440p, as the RX 7900 XTX is still pushing 205 average FPS, being 27% faster than the RX 6950 XT that runs this game smooth as butter. As even at 4K it still manages to achieve almost 120 average FPS at ultra settings, with both RDNA 3 GPUs delivering only a mild performance uplift. Hogwarts Legacy is still a pretty CPU-dependent title even when running ultra settings, and that's why we see all these results so close at 1080p, with the RX 7900 XTX being only 16% faster than the RX 6950 XT. At 1440p though, things shift to a more GPU-dependent situation, where the RX 7900 XT is now 19% faster than the RX 6950 XT, with the RX 7900 XTX being 35% faster. Definitely making a difference for users using, for example, high refresh rate panels. At 4K things get a lot heavier for the GPU side, but even there the RX 6950 XT manages to get really close to the 60 average FPS mark while using ultra settings, with the RX 7900 XTX, for example, delivering 83 average FPS, being now 42% faster than the previous generation top tier card.
Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra is type Cessna 152 4 miles south.
With Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, we have the same exact scenario as with Hogwarts Legacy. These GPUs are so strong that at 1080p all of them force the CPU to bottleneck, having more or less the same FPS numbers. At 1440p the RX 6950 XT immediately goes back to its place, but the RX 7900 XTX is still slightly CPU bottlenecked, hence the results being so close to the RX 7900 XT, and it is only at 4K that some relevant differences can be seen, with the RX 7900 XTX finally being 50% faster than the RX 6950 XT. Great results. Our first Vulkan benchmark is Rainbow Six Extraction. At 1080p, the RX 6950 XT proves extremely worthy once again, with the RX 7900 XT being only 16% faster, and with even the RX 7900 XTX being only 31% faster. As we go into higher resolutions like 1440p, the RX 7900 XT does gain some more ground, now being 24% faster, with the RX 7900 XT also raising its advantage over the RX 6950 XT, now to 42%. At 4K, we finally start seeing some interesting numbers, with the RX 7900 XT being 32% faster and the RX 7900 XTX being a whopping 59% faster, making it a worthy upgrade for the RX 6950 XT users. In Red Dead Redemption 2, things are a bit different, with the difference in between the three cards being considerably lower. I mean, the RX 7900 XT is barely outperforming the RX 6950 XT, and there isn't much of a CPU bottleneck situation, as things don't change much even at 1440p, with the RX 7900 XT being barely faster than the RDNA 2 top dog. Something that once again does not change even at 4K, where the RX 6950 XT is still pushing 79 average FPS, while the RX 7900 XT is barely 12% faster. And of course, it takes an RX 7900 XTX to raise that difference to 35%. Now with Guardians of the Galaxy, we have once again the usual CPU bottleneck at 1080p, with the RDNA 3 cards having slightly higher FPS numbers because they handle CPU-bound scenarios better due to how they were designed. At 1440p the differences are bigger, but they are still highly CPU restricted, because that's why they have the same performance more or less, and it is only at 4K that we see the real GPU data in this title, with even the RX 7900 XTX being only 28% faster than the RX 6950 XT, which is not a very good result. The Last of Us Part 1 is one of the titles that I retested recently, alongside Forza Horizon 5, Hogwarts Legacy, Spider-Man Remastered and God of War. At 1080p, smart access memory is giving us exponential performance boosts, something that wasn't happening before on the previous drivers and game versions. The RX 6950 XT, for example, got a whopping 39% increase, which is nothing less than awesome, with the RX 7900 XT following with a 34% increase, and the RX 7900 XTX with a 27% increase. At 1440p, smart access memory is still pretty relevant for these three cards, of course, with the RX 7900 XTX struggling to be 29% faster than the previous gen top tier. And at 4K the performance differences finally get to more acceptable levels, let's say, where the RX 6950 XT is now achieving 60 average FPS and the RX 7900 XTX is being 44% faster, with even the RX 7900 XT presenting a decent 23% performance advantage. Not bad, I guess. God of War was also retested, and the retest was important as recent drivers do change the shader cache loading a bit, but once everything's loaded, the 1% lows are better than before. At 1080p I can tell by testing that the RX 7900 XTX is still slightly CPU bottlenecked at this resolution, something that does not happen with the other two cards. And as we move to 1440p the differences get bigger, with the RX 7900 XTX now being up to 44% faster than the RX 6950 XT. And at 1440p ultra-wide things get even better for the newer cards, with the RX 7900 XTX being up to 54% faster, performing exceptionally well in this title. As for the 12 games average, well, things are a little bit different from what they were some months ago. At 1080p, for example, the performance differences are way lower than what AMD promised, with the RX 7900 XTX being only 23% faster than the previous top dog. At 1440p the difference raises to 33% though, and at 4K it stands over the 40% mark. Which is not that bad actually if we consider that this card had exactly the same MSRP as the 6900 XT. Let's now lay an eye on ray tracing.
But lost hope. We're not from here either. Stellantis locked us up here a year ago.
As usual, Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition is our first ray tracing title. At 1080p, the RDNA 3 cards do have a good advantage over the RDNA 2 Top Dog when it comes to ray tracing, with the RX 7900 XT being 31% faster and the XTX being 44% faster. As the resolution gets higher, the RX 7900 XTX tends to get increased advantage over the RX 6950 XT, but the RX 7900 XT actually loses some advantage here, which is interesting. Nothing really game-breaking, let's say, just letting you know. Cyberpunk 2077 is also an interesting title for ray tracing because this is supposed to be one of the best ray tracing scenarios for the RDNA 3 cards, versus of course the previous RDNA 2 ones. At 1080p, the RX 7900 XTX is 40% faster than the RX 6950 XT when using ray tracing, but only 32% faster when using ray tracing plus FSR, as the internal resolution gets lower and the amount of rays gets reduced as well, making it a much easier job for the RX 6950 XT. At 1440p, the RX 7900 XTX is now 45% faster with just ray tracing, but once again only 36% faster when using ray tracing plus FSR, which is exactly the same percentage difference in between these cards on rasterization. Quite odd. Moving to Resident Evil 4, with RE Engine that usually prefers AMD GPUs, all GPUs perform extremely well at 1080p even when using ray tracing. At 1440p, the RX 7900 XTX is 31% faster than the RX 6950 XT in rasterization and 35% faster with ray tracing, showing us a mild increase in ray tracing performance, but nothing astonishing. At 1440p ultra-wide, the RX 7900 XT is now the card that loses less performance when switching ray tracing on, being 19% faster than the RX 7900 XT and 39% faster than the RX 6950 XT, which is somewhat in line with what we've seen before, I guess. Moving to Spider-Man Remastered, also one of the games I retested due to recent patches, all the GPUs are mostly CPU bottlenecked at 1080p. At 1440p things aren't much different, with the RX 6950 XT being the only card with less CPU bottleneck, hence presenting slightly lower results this time. And it is only at 4K that the real GPU benchmarks appear, with the RX 7900 XTX being 45% faster than the RX 6950 XT in rasterization and 52% faster in ray tracing, with even the RX 7900 XT standing its ground pretty well, delivering 75 average FPS when using ray tracing at 4K. In terms of upscaling, everything was retested as well, and starting with God of War, we see that the performance scales are quite consistent when using FSR at 1440p. Nothing really relevant to see here, something that does not really change at 1440p ultra-wide, with the RX 6950 XT being the card with the biggest performance boost, 24% versus 17% for the other cards, and I guess it is because it handles higher resolutions worse than the other two cards, so using a lower render resolution has bigger benefits. The same doesn't happen in Spider-Man Remastered because even though the RX 6950 XT has a higher performance uplift versus the other two cards, it happens mostly because the other two cards get CPU bottlenecked to some extent when using FSR, while the RX 6950 XT doesn't, so the performance gains are different. The RX 7900 XT though has very close to the 30% performance uplift the RX 6950 XT does, and this since it is much less CPU bottleneck than the RX 7900 XTX. Very interesting results that show that a CPU bottleneck can indeed affect the results, even at 4K, of course, if we're using upscalers.
So guys, now that you've seen the results, what do you actually think about the performance or the performance brackets according to the prices? Well, in my opinion, let's say each one of these three cards is a plausible buy, depending on what you want, of course. So the 6950 XT is an excellent price for people not wanting to spend that much amount of money, which is already a ridiculous amount because we're talking about $600. But still, you have an excellent card for $600. I mean, it's a 6950 XT, 16 gigabytes VRAM, so the VRAM will be more than enough for some years. you are getting an awesome card. If you want to take it a step further, you'll pay a bit more. In America, for example, $150, so it is indeed a bit more, but you're gonna have, for example, at 4K around 30% more performance. If you're playing lower resolutions, well, a 6950 XT or even a card slower than that will be more than fine. But if you're going for higher resolutions, the 7900 XT might be a choice, okay? Because it consumes less power than the 6950 XT and it is faster in terms of ray tracing, rasterization, everything. And it costs $150 more. That's the drawback. As for the 7900 XTX, it is obviously the fastest card, definitely, and of course these cards will only get better with time, mostly the RDNA 3 ones, the 7900 series, because AMD is still trying to figure it out, the MCM design, the multi-chip module design, because it's a new thing, and with time it will get better and better. Smart access memory will start working better and better, and will have improved performance like we saw in The Last of Us, for example. Forza Horizon 5 performance was also fixed, and more games will get this treatment as time passes by. FSR 3 will also be released for these cards, at least for RDNA 3 cards. It is guaranteed that it will be released for those cards. As for the RDNA 2 cards, well, it isn't guaranteed. So if you actually want FSR 3, maybe you can consider, for example, the 7900 XT over the 6950 XT. As for full performance, you get the 7900 XTX, or if you want the best of the best, get the 4090, obviously.
This is like common sense. The more GPUs you buy, the more money you save. That's right, the more GPUs you buy, the more money you save.
But concluding the conclusion, if you want a card for 1440p, the 6950 XT is more than enough for your needs. If you want a card for 1440p or higher, or let's say 1440p with some ray tracing settings, then you want the 7900 XT, let's say the XTS. But if you want 4K or if you want 1440p high refresh rate with some ray tracing enabled, some ray tracing in some titles enabled, then you need the XTX because it is considerably faster in ray tracing, and in terms of higher resolutions it is also considerably faster, about 40% faster than the 6950 XT, which is nothing. Yeah, it's nothing. No, well, it's 40%. What I meant is that 40% is actually a lot. So if you're playing at 4K, upgrading from the 6950 to the 7900 XTX is actually a good upgrade in my opinion, or at least a decent one. That's what I meant. And yeah, basically that's it. Let me know what you think, if you would buy one of these cards, or if you would upgrade, let's say, from a 6950 XT to a 7900 XTX. Because, well, I noticed the difference, because I play at 1440p ultra wide, but most of you most likely wouldn't. Once again, thank you for watching and see you in the next video.